Hello there, welcome back, thanks for joining me again. So this is the second half of my top 30 albums, my favourite albums ever of my life so far. I want your recommendations. There's 3 rules. So firstly, there's only kind of 1 album per artist or band. Second rule is to just be very honest. I'm not trying to be cool, I'm not trying to say that my musical taste is better than yours, it's just this is honestly what I like. And thirdly, do minimal research. I do like just as little research as possible on these albums. And then, yeah, let's go. It takes time, you know, this takes a bit of an investment. When you first listen to it, you're not going to like it. That's the thing about prog music, so progressive rock music. It's very, it can be quite cerebral and almost a bit kind of inward looking, navel gazing, a bit pompous. You've got these amazing musicians that perhaps have come from a classical background or a jazz background, but they want to have their go at rock music. That's kind of what progressive rock is. It's you know, musicians from outside the genre that are trying to do something interesting within the rock sphere. So it does become almost a kind of a bit elite sounding, if that makes sense. Close to the Edge, it's only 3 tracks, and the first track is, I don't know, 17, 18 minutes long or something. And it's split up into different sections, but it really all plays just like one song. And it takes you on this journey, and it's very descriptive and it's epic. Because a lot of prog music, I think, is kind of epic in scale and its arrangement. But the bit where it kind of breaks down, layering of voices, and then it explodes into this pipe organ section, is one of the most amazing pieces of music I've ever heard. And yeah, it kind of blows your head off. It really is that powerful. And the other tracks, you know, they're still very, very solid, but they're kind of shadowed by this epic first track. So Yes is a band that I'm only just on the start of my journey with Yes. I think there's a lot more that I will discover. Yeah, Close to the Edge, check it out. It's probably one of the best prog albums I've ever heard. It's always a bit controversial when you have to pick a favourite Beatles album, and you know, some people will have like a very obscure choice and they're trying to be all edgy. Well, as I'm going for Sgt. Pepper's, it's perhaps a bit of an obvious one, but it's the album that I know and love the most out of their whole work. When I was very young, my mum and dad got me this book of chords. It was like a Beatles songbook. I think like Beatles for Buskers. I'll pop it on the screen here so you can see it. And so I kind of studied this book when I was quite young in terms of like songwriting and the different choices of chords that they would use. And then through that, yeah, it kind of just gave me a solid grounding in songwriting. And yeah, going back to this pick, Sgt. Pepper's. I mean, I'm a big fan of Paul McCartney in particular. It is somewhat controversial to say, I think, but I certainly prefer Paul McCartney's stuff over John's by quite a long margin. I think John's really overrated. I know he died way before his time, and there's a certain kind of mythical status about John Lennon. I don't have anything against the guy, but I just think Paul is somewhat overlooked. I tend to prefer Paul's songs, and there's lots of Paul songs on Sgt. Pepper's. I think the ending of, you know, A Day in the Life, and the way that kind of caps off this album just so perfectly, and you know, that final E major chord, that's a really powerful track at the end of the album. Huge amounts of energy from these 3 young guys. Are really young when Supergrass got signed, and although this album kind of came out in I don't know, the Britpop era, I don't really think of them as a Britpop band. Not really. They had a few big hit singles, like All Right and stuff, that kind of came on the bandwagon of Britpop, but I always thought they were doing something very different. But you know, Supergrass went on to have some other really solid albums, other albums that I listen to now and I still really enjoy. But I don't think any of those albums really has the bursting energy of I Should Coco. When I was at university, I went to go and see Supergrass. They were playing the university tours, which is quite a common thing for bands to do in the UK. I went to go and see them, and I was expecting them to be like really energetic and vibrant and engaging and kind of cheeky and all that kind of stuff. and they weren't. They were just miserable and really didn't look like they wanted to be there. They just played their songs, no interaction with the crowd, no real engagement with the audience, and I was really disappointed. And I was like, if you don't care, then why should I care? I spent all this money to go and see you perform. So yeah, after that, I kind of got really bit annoyed with Supergrass, and I thought, I wrote them off. It's only recently that I've kind of rediscovered Supergrass and listened to their albums again, and just some excellent songs. But yeah, I Should Coco is very much a product of its time. Love this album. I don't listen to it very much anymore. Perhaps a bit too old for Dookie, but at the time I loved it, and it meant so much to me. It was Green Day's big breakthrough album, right? It was 1994, I think, and so big tracks like Basket Case and When I Come Around, like big singles, and they broke through. And I think previously they were much more of a kind of indie little band doing their kind of pop punk shtick. My friend had a copy of Dookie, and I listened to it. I loved it, and I bought my own copy, and I had to send off for it. And then a few weeks later, it came in the post. I had to send off my little check, and it came back in the post, the little cassette. And here it is. I've still got it all these years later. And it's one of my prized possessions. I'm sure it's not worth that much money. You can probably get it on eBay. But anyway, this is original from 1994, and the lyrics are quite revealing, quite vulnerable. He makes himself quite vulnerable when he talks, and it tapped into a lot of that teenage angsty stuff. I suppose if you were a teenager in the 90s, there was a lot of bands trying to cater to that. But yeah, I love it. It's just such a fun album, and I love the artwork as well. I had the big poster of Dookie, the album artwork, on my wall for years when I was a teenager. To me, it really fits so well with the music. It was a big explosion of colour, and it was bright, and it was energetic, and brilliant. Asia by Steely Dan. Is this the best Steely Dan album? There's other really good albums. Maybe it isn't. But it's the one I like the most. It's the one that I think is very accessible. It's got loads of very short poppy tunes on it. I'm not going to go into detail into all the session musicians that Steely Dan got on board to make this album, but just suffice it to say that it's got some of the finest players that you'll ever hear. I mean, I remember first hearing Black Cow. It was on the radio. I think I was in a Starbucks in Corfu or something, and this song came on the radio, the PA system or whatever, and I was like, wow, what is that? I have to find out what this tune is, because it was jazz type chords and very interesting chord sequences, and it was really groovy, and I was like, I've never heard anything like this before. So yeah, that was the first time I heard Black Cow, and from that point onwards I really got into Steely Dan. At the top of their journey, this is a good album. It's folky, it's poppy, it's rocky, but this, I think this album's on the list because this was the album that restored my faith in modern music. I think everyone has that time in their life where you get to a certain age and new music just doesn't really seem like it's for you anymore, like pop music or stuff that's in the charts. And then you go, okay, well, I've got my music that I like from my period of time, and everything after that, I don't care. So for me, that was kind of like 1999. Anything after 1999, I just didn't really care for like new music, and I was more interested in looking back. And then I heard Fleet Foxes maybe in the early 2010s or something, and I thought, well, this is new music, but I love it, and it's so impressive, and it's incredible songwriting. And I thought, actually, there are, as I said, it kind of restored my faith, because there are bands and artists currently making music that is just fantastic. And then I realised that I was being a bit of an idiot, and I'd perhaps been overlooking or dismissing modern music because I just thought it was of a poorer quality, but that's not really the case. This is just a fantastic album, and I love Robin Pecknold's voice and the harmonies that he creates with himself, and also the harmonies with the other band, like the vocal harmonies, as well as his really interesting lines, like guitar lines that weave in and out, but they also have an ability as a band to kind of come together and create this very powerful like awe-inspiring sound together. There's songs like Ragged Wood that just hit you, and I think that's like one of the best songs I've ever heard. Probably Ragged Wood would be up there. Yeah, it's good. Some people who are really into Blur are going to be like, why have you chosen Parklife? Blur have done more interesting, better albums, and I disagree. I think this is Blur at their best. Yes, it's their most commercially successful album, but that doesn't mean you need to discount it. And I really like Modern Life is Rubbish. I think I was toying up, should I do Parklife, should I do Modern Life is Rubbish? I think just on balance, Parklife is better. It's for me. It's more enjoyable. It's more fun. Modern Life is Rubbish is a very important album, I guess within Britpop and within Blur's oeuvre, but Parklife for me just has that kind of quirkiness and silliness and colour and irreverence, but it's also got very tender moments. Back in the 90s, people will talk about the whole kind of Oasis versus Blur thing, which I think is a bit of a red herring. I mean, you can't really compare the two bands. They were so dissimilar. And I don't think they were really trying to compete with each other anyway. I think it was all just PR, just to try and get them a bit more press attention, and it worked. And you know, people would talk about it, wouldn't it? It's all silly nonsense. But there's no Oasis albums on my list. Oasis, in my opinion, don't come anywhere close to Blur. I mean, yes, they wrote some iconic anthemic songs, but as soon as they had success, they just came off straight off the boil. Everything that's good about Definitely Maybe. I'm supposed to be talking about Blur, aren't I? But anyway, everything that's good about Definitely Maybe is the fact that they wanted to get out of the kind of the area that they grew up in, and had this burning ambition to better themselves, and that was really evident in the album, and I loved it. And then as soon as they became successful, it's like, oh, what do you have to talk about anymore? But anyway, Blur, far better band. They were, in my opinion, they were more kind of artistic, more willing to take risks. This, you know, throughout, even throughout Parklife, which was commercially successful, they're taking lots of risks musically here, and trying stuff and pulling things from different genres and putting it all together. And yeah, I mean, what more to say? Parklife, it's just, it can't not be on this list. Hello. I've got to be careful I don't talk about Cardiacs for too long, because that's one of those bands that I could. Is this Cardiac's best album? Maybe not, but it's kind of my favourite, because it's, well, at least it's the favourite I've heard so far, because it's very concise, and it's almost like a concept album, and it's got a start, a middle and an end, and it's got consistency throughout, and it's just a very enjoyable listen. You can go right from the start to the end, and you have to listen to it all in one go almost, and every track is just incredible and dense. But Cardiac's music is very dense. It's almost undefinable genre-wise. It's kind of like punk, rock, metal-y, art metal, avant-garde. I don't know, it's pointless trying to define it, but you know, if you like things to be quite challenging, you like them to be unpredictable, there is no more unpredictable music than Cardiac's. Mr. Bungle and Zappa maybe, and Beefheart, but Cardiac's are probably the most unpredictable in the way that their songs are arranged. There's very little by way of repetition. You have to listen to over and over again to memorize it and get familiar with it, so you can anticipate what's coming. I've got quite a lot of their albums where it's them playing live, and they're just the tightest band live. It's unbelievable to hear how tight they are. They're so well rehearsed and so well practiced. Creatively, they're doing things that no one else is doing, which is a rare thing, I think, a really rare thing. drukQs. I did a cover of Avril 14th on my channel, so go and check that video out if you haven't seen it. But in my review, I talk about Avril 14th, the piece of music, but also drukQs, the album. So some of what I say now is going to repeat. But yeah, I first heard this album as soon as it came out. I kind of read some pre-launch hype about it, and I was really excited about the album. I'd heard some Aphex Twin stuff before, and I had got some of his earlier albums, but this came out and I loved it. I love the sound, the complexity, the different kind of genres and styles within this album. It's like a double album. So some of it's kind of glitchy techno, Some of it is prepared piano, some of it is just Disclavier piano, some of it is kind of soundscapes, sound effects, and some of it's kind of more ambient and chilled out perhaps, but it's all in there. You have to listen to it over and over again, and each time you listen to it, you'll find something new. You can't possibly memorize the music. You could probably get quite close, but you couldn't memorize every little thing that's going on because there's just so much. But to me, that's really interesting, and to me, that's given me 20 years of listening enjoyment and finding new things within this one piece of work. If you haven't heard drukQs, then definitely check it out. Mr. Bungle really are one of my favourite bands ever, and they score very high in this list. They're doing very, very, very interesting, unique, challenging things, as well as being like really silly, which I really enjoy within any kind of music. And California, if you're a Mr. Bungle fan, you might think that there's other Bungle albums which are perhaps more interesting. But I like California the most. Quite simply, it's quite a challenging album. It's really colourful. It's exotic. It takes lots of different influences, like a lot of Bungle music. But it's not an easily accessible album. None of the tracks are that easily accessible. Although it does have a few kind of ballads on it. Like Pink Cigarette and Retro Vertigo. There's some kind of more, softer, more traditional songs, which I wonder if Mr. Bungle were trying to get a hit single. I don't know. I don't think so. It's dense. It's incredibly creative. It's Mike Patton's vocals probably at his best, at their best. I think like Trevor Dunn, the bassist, one of the founding members, he's got a lot to do with the sound as well, and it just sounds very unique. Mr. Bungle, it's interesting, quirky, jolty, angular, rock, thrash, poppy in some sections, avant-garde. Yeah, it's good stuff. It's good stuff.
Wake up early and rocket to Alaska.
I think every single track is incredible, and I've never heard an album quite like it where every single track is perfect. So the reason that I'm aware of this album is that I was listening to a podcast, an Adam and Joe podcast, and that how you sometimes have like a podcast of a radio show, and when they play a song on the radio, you can't put that into a podcast because you don't have the rights to do it or the kind of licensing, or it'd be too expensive. So they just cut out the music. So you might hear a few seconds and then it just cuts out, and then you hear the last couple of seconds, and then you're back into the talking again. One of the songs that they played on this podcast was Fantasies. It was only the first couple of seconds. It just went, because it doesn't really have an intro, it just goes straight into the verse, that track. So I heard that couple of seconds, and that was enough for me to like buy the album from. That's how interesting I thought it was, like a really interesting sound. It sounded very bubbly, really interesting chord changes. Music taste is very subjective, and you might just hear something and it's like, yeah, that's for me. I love it. That's everything I like about music, and everything that I want to hear. Yeah, I think R.E.M. for a long time were my favourite bands, throughout my teenage years, I'd say. And I felt very connected with the music, and I felt very connected to the lyrics of Michael Stipe. And Murmur, this album, which is on my list, is this my favourite R.E.M. album? I mean, I guess it is. But the album that was most important to me when I was a kid was Automatic for the People. It was so important that it was one of these ones that I wouldn't listen to. I didn't want to ruin it. It had tracks on there like Night Swimming and Find the River and Sweetness Follows that I just thought were just so out of this world beautiful. But Murmur, I don't know, it was their first, I guess, major label release. But it just sounds so weird. That's why I like it. It just sounds really weird, very kind of ethereal. And the album cover, that photo of whatever it is, some kind of train track or something, surrounded by this kind of like misty leaves and stuff. It does really represent the music quite well, I think. It's definitely got like a foggy, misty quality to it. very sizzly in the mix. But you've just got really good songwriting as well, like great songs, like very well written, well arranged. So I don't know why. I don't know why I like it so much, but I do.
I could have swore her hair was made of.
Frank Zappa. I mean, what can I say about Frank Zappa? This album changed my life. It was that important to me. I think prior to listening to this album, I'd listened to mostly mainstream music, some rock, some metal. Nothing that really challenged the orthodoxy. But I was unaware of that, you see. No one had shown me something that was avant-garde, something that was as different as a Frank Zappa or a Captain Beefheart. I met some girl once, and she mentioned Beefheart, and I was like, okay, that sounds really interesting. It's kind of 60s avant-garde stuff I hadn't heard before, so I was like, okay, let's try it. And I think my friend Chris had this album, Bongo Fury, which is Frank Zappa and Captain Beefheart kind of coming together. I remember listening to Bongo Fury, and you've got Captain Beefheart doing his poetry, this really obscure, absurdist poetry. And then you've got the musicians that are doing things that are equally obscure and absurd. And you got Zappa as the band leader, kind of orchestrating and conducting everything. Yeah, the harmonies, the vocal harmonies that on Carolina Hardcore Ecstasy that came out, and I was like, I've never heard anything like this before. I've never heard music that is so free in its expression. And I say it was completely, my mind melted when I heard this album. It was that profound, because they just broke all of the rules that I thought existed, but they didn't, of course, and there's no rules in music. So I said this album changed my life, but it exploded my mind, because it forced me to be more open-minded to different styles of music, which I hadn't been exposed to before. So, thanks to my mate Chris for lending me it. And then from that point onwards, so Bongo Fury was the entry point, and then I just consumed Zappa for years. Just more and more of his albums. I bought them. I don't know how many Zappa albums I bought. I don't know, 20 odd. But he was prolific during his career, and he made, I don't know, 70, 80, 90. I don't know. Go on Wikipedia and have a look. I mean, Zappa was also an incredible guitarist, totally underrated. But just as a thinker, as a musician, as a composer, arranger, a band leader, and just as almost like a politician and philosopher, in the way that he thought about life and how he commented on what was going on in America at the time. Not just America, but the world. He was unafraid to make these statements that sometimes sounded quite political, but it was just his philosophy. And I totally got into Zappa. And I still am, to some degree. I don't really listen to his music that much anymore. I think I kind of overdosed on Zappa. And now I've moved more back towards traditional pop sensibilities. Zappa, you can't go wrong. Bongo Fury, you can't go wrong. My introduction to his music, and blew my head open. This is it, number 2. The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, The Lamb. Genesis, this is early Genesis, Peter Gabriel Genesis. I mean, can you believe it? I only heard this album a year ago, and already it's number 2 on my list. I think this is just the best concept album ever. It's the best double album ever. It's the best Genesis album. It's the best prog album. It's the best rock album. It's just beyond anything I've heard, apart from, number 1 is still to come. But this is just as good as it gets, really. You got the classic lineup. You got Peter Gabriel, who kind of engineered the concept and the story around this album. Main vocals. You've got Phil Collins on drums and backing vocals. You've got Tony Banks on keyboards, synths, pianos, organs. You've got Mike Rutherford on bass and guitars. You've got Steve Hackett on guitars. I mean, this is the classic lineup. This is the best lineup of Genesis. And this was a band of 5 incredible musicians who weren't really competing with one another to be the front person, but they all contributed in their own way. They all wrote music, wrote sections of music, and they came together just to create something For those various albums when it was all 5 of them, that was just unbelievable. And then over time, members left. I have it on vinyl, and I don't even have a record player, but I wanted this album because I just need to have it in my life. One day I'll buy a record player, and I can listen to The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. But I wanted to have it also because it's got all of the, the album artwork by Hypnosis, and it's got the story in there as well. So I thought that was cool, and that's something that I wanted to have, wanted to own. It's just fantastic songs. Every song is like incredible. You could take an individual song out of this double album, and it's still like fantastic. I mean, yeah, it doesn't have like I guess big hit singles like some like later Genesis music, which is much more poppy. This isn't a pop album; it's a prog rock album. But I don't know, it's still very accessible, and you got stuff like Carpet Crawlers and the title track, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. It's some of the best songs. For me, Here Comes the Supernatural Anaesthetist is just a work of sheer brilliance, and to me it's so special, this album. I don't even want to listen to it anymore because I don't want to ruin it. I don't want to get over familiar with it. I don't really want to work out how they did it. You don't have to like Genesis to like this album, I don't think. I think you could just enjoy it. If you're prepared to go on a bit of a journey, prepared to give it a few listens just to really get used to it. Yeah, wonderful. And that's it, number 1, Spin Doctors. Were you expecting that? Probably not. Yeah, it's hard putting this list together. Really hard. Who should come top? Who should be in your top 10? Who have you had to leave out? It's all arbitrary anyway. It doesn't really matter. But I was thinking, out of all the bands and all the artists and all the albums I've experienced, listened to, which one kind of means the most to me in my life? And it's the Spin Doctors, the band. And you might be thinking, again, like Crash Test Dummies, you might be thinking, oh, they're just a silly little one-hit wonder band, weren't they? They wrote 2 Princes and that was it. That doesn't mean that they're not a very, very good band and have written some really good songs that mean a lot to me, and to a lot of other people, I'm sure. And again, as I said right at the start of these videos, is that I'm just trying to be honest. I'm not trying to be cool. If you only like music because you think it's going to make you cool, you're an idiot. I wasn't a huge fan of 2 Princes, the single, but a friend of mine, when I was very young, Stephen, he played me Pocket Full of Kryptonite, I guess their first big album, and I loved it. I loved the drums. The drums of Aaron Comas are incredible. He uses lots of ghost notes, and his snare sounds incredible. He's got this very poppy snare, and he's a fantastic drummer. I think he's one of the best drummers I've heard. And then you've got the guitarist, is Eric Schenkman, and he does these amazing riffs, these amazing lines. He's got blues solos, very creative. He's just like one guitarist, but he creates so much colour, and he uses really interesting chords as well. You got Chris Barron, the singer. Not the best singer in the world, but he's a really, really good singer. Very interesting vocals, very poetic. It's really great melodies. He's got nice harmonies, kind of country harmonies. He does some kind of weird things where he seems to put on an extra syllable to every word that he says, which is odd. But that's just idiosyncratic style of his, and that's cool. And then Mark White, the bassist, who's a phenomenal bass player, and he creates so much depth within the music, because they're only a 4-piece. There's only one guitarist and one bassist, but yet they create a really thick sound. I've listened to it more than I've listened to any other album. I wouldn't even try and put a number on how many times I listened to this album. And I think there's an element of, it's kind of comforting to me because I've heard it so much. I'll always put it on, I'll always enjoy it. So this concludes my top 30 albums, or at least albums that they mean something to me in my life, and hopefully hasn't been too boring. Hopefully I haven't waffled too much, and hopefully you kind of get a bit of an understanding of my music taste, why I like the stuff that I do. I'd really like to hear or get some thoughts, some ideas, some suggestions about what else I could listen to. You'd be doing me a massive favour, because I'm so bored with my music collection at the moment. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it's been a bit of a slog getting through this long video, but I appreciate it very much. And yeah, stay tuned, because I'll be doing some other songs approximating them in a fashion for you. And you only, no one else. It's only you that are allowed to watch this video, I think. I'm not sure, I need to check on that.